This talk was recorded during Goldsmiths Fair 2020. Goldsmiths Fair is a unique selling event showcasing the work of a selection of some of the most talented, established and emerging fine jewellers and contemporary silversmiths creating and making in the UK today. Next year's fair will run from the 28th of September to the 10th of October 2021. Until then, you can browse the makers from this year's fair and read stories about them and their work at goldsmithsfair.co.uk.
Now on with the event. I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Janice Hosegood, curator, author, jewellery expert, head of communications at Corporate Art, general industry expert really, is this afternoon interviewing two very talented but very different silversmiths who have come into the industry in very different ways as well. Callum Partridge, who graduated from the CAS not long ago, fabricates wonderfully playful, abstract yet functional pieces, while Samuel Waterhouse is self-taught and generally raises pieces that resemble beautiful ancient artefacts. Please welcome our speakers.
So welcome to today's In Conversation for Goldsmiths Fair with silversmiths and jewellers, Callum Partridge, Samuel Waterhouse and me, Janice Hosegood. Callum exhibited at Goldsmiths Fair as a graduate in 2018 and again last year in 2019. His work has been featured in many galleries and exhibitions, including Collect at Saatchi Gallery with Goldsmiths Fair, Contemporary Applied Arts and New Designers. Samuel's first showing at Goldsmiths Fair was in 2017. Other shows and galleries include the Scottish Gallery, Collect at Saatchi Gallery with Goldsmiths Fair, and with Decimus Collective at the Goldsmiths Centre. Both makers join us as online exhibitors for this year's digital Goldsmiths Fair. Thank you both for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to talk to you yet again. And I'd like to start by asking you to share an insight into where it all started for you. What's your earliest memory of wanting to make? And were you always drawn to working in metal? Callum, maybe you kick us off.
I suppose I've always been creative and making things because of my dyslexia that kind of pushed me in that direction anyway, even from a very early age, because, you know, getting all these books put in front of you and you had to kind of communicate through words rather than kind of through drawings and things. And I found it much easier to kind of draw than I did to read. So that's kind of, I suppose, the initial impact of my creativity. And you know, I knew I wanted to be something within that. But I suppose my first kind of initial metalworking was at a local community workshop in Nailsworth, where I kind of learned to do jewellery at the age of 10, I think, or 11, something like that, and made a ring, and then kind of went on from there, really, this kind of passion for working with material.
That's quite early, isn't it, to be picking up, you know, sort of metal in the saw. I imagine. Quite nice to have a local community opportunity that lets you sort of experiment with metal and saws and files and things like that.
It's really amazing because I think you don't normally get opportunities like that. So I feel very lucky to have found that and to have had that opportunity to kind of grow in that way and learn. And
so a local jeweller, a local maker that held the course for obviously young people at the time.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good.
What about you, Samuel? Earliest memories?
Earliest memories are just when I was living in Northumberland, really, where I grew up with my brothers, and we just spent a lot of time making bows and arrows and things like that. There was no swords and things like that. There was no metal work at all. I never ever worked in metal until I was about 19, when just that's my earliest memory. I don't know. Yeah, well, so when I was about 19, I was studying English at Manchester University, and then one day, just by chance, I was at home, and my dad happened to show me a silver spoon that he told me he had made. and so I asked them to show me the first few sort of metalworking techniques, and then I started making some things for my girlfriend at the time, and then continued to do that, and that was my first introduction into metal.
Is your dad a craftsman? Was your dad a craftsman? Is he?
He's not just no, but he's just very, very good at making anything really. So he had done a few night classes when he was at university, and he had this box of he still had a box of these silversmithing tools, and he'd made a couple of things, and they're beautifully made, and he just showed me the first few techniques, and then from that I would just really enjoyed it.
What about your family, Callum? Sorry, a creative family.
My mum used to do art at school and wanted to kind of follow that as a career, but kind of circumstances led to her not doing that. So I suppose she always encouraged me to be creative from an early age, and trying to support my dyslexia as much as possible, and make it a kind of positive thing rather than a negative, and keep inspiring me. So I think that definitely did encourage me.
Yeah. It's an interesting statistic that I learned through working with many craftspeople over the years, that it's something immense, like 50% and above self-recognise as dyslexic to some degree or another of creative people. So I think it's a natural sort of language route. It's a natural way, but also I think rather than being a disadvantage for a creative person, it appears, certainly, and the people I know really well, it appears to be a profound advantage, just because we're all wired differently, but obviously people who cope with dyslexia are wired much more differently, and therefore the creative route seems to be extremely strong. So you're in good company, extremely good company. But you both took, obviously, from these early stages, early interests, early routes, you both took different routes and training to get where you are today. And I'm interested to know more. Samuel, perhaps yours is a little bit less conventional. Can you share it with us, please?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm so sorry. I think I sort of jumped ahead in the questions before. So
Elaborate for us.
I'll elaborate. So I was studying English literature at Manchester, and then my dad showed me this spoon, and he showed me the first couple of techniques, and that really got me interested. And then just whenever I could, every opportunity, whenever I came home, I would make jewellery for my girlfriend at the time. But then I started, as I got more into it, I started renting a workshop from a jeweller in Manchester during my last year there, which was great because that was the first time I had access to sort of proper tools, really, which was really good. And then from then on, I then came to live in London, and I spent 6 months in I spent about 5 years in London doing learning and making on the job, really. And I think in a way my best education has really been by being in close proximity to other people. So I was in I should also mention my dad also, when he gave me these first few tools and materials, he also gave me 2 really good books, and since then I've really strongly loved reading about metalworking techniques, and really paid close attention to them.
What were the books?
They were these 2 books. So they were the Goldsmiths and Silversmiths Handbook, which is all about materials, and then metalwork and its decorating, and that's all about techniques. They were just the first 2 ones which got me started. But I'm so sorry. And then just in terms of being in proximity to other people, and one last thing just to say about these. I love these books so much because this is just a personal thing about about me, but these books only have illustrations inside them. There's no photographs, which I think I found very helpful, especially at the beginning, because I think the illustrations are a bit more open to interpretation. So especially at the beginning, you can sort of feel like you've not got something to match against exactly.
That's intimidating, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
So absolutely. But then just one, there is really one key person who played a huge part in my sort of education, who I should mention, who is another Goldsmiths Fair exhibitor called Lucy Gledhill, and I spent 5 years in her workshop. And before I went there, I did like the things that I was making, but they were very, very crude, really, in comparison, I hope, to what I'm making now. And so being in Lucy's workshop and seeing her work, and obviously she'd been doing Goldsmiths for a long time by then, that gave me something to sort of, that sort of quality of work was really helpful to see and to aim towards, really. So that was, that was sort of my education, really.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure Lucy was an enormous help and a great inspiration. She's a very, very talented maker and teacher as well. Yeah, she's good. What about you, Callum? A more conventional route, perhaps, in terms of our fellow exhibitors at Goldsmiths Fair? Tell us where you studied.
So I studied at London Metropolitan under Simone Tenhomple, Heidi Yo, and Eddie Tock. Which was wonderful, really, because it was so inspiring to see, the tutors that are ahead of their game and in the industry, and that was kind of so accessible. It seemed so accessible to go somewhere with it. It was really great. And Simone, was really really good tutor to have for me, because she, being a fellow dyslexic, we kind of worked well together. We understood each other. It was kind of communicate through drawings rather than kind of write a list of instructions for things, and we'd have good conversation and kind of, I think, shared a mutual understanding and appreciation for kind of material information.
That's quite a team of inspiring tutors you were there with. A real privilege, and equally wonderful makers in their own right. Yeah, and they speak very highly of you too. So I know that for a fact. And so graduating from London Met, that was the end of your more formal studies. But I think, as we all know, and similarly to the route that Samuel has taken, learning never stops, does it? Whether it's self-initiated, whether it's less formalised, or whether it's from graduating, under the tuition of inspirational teachers, it never stops. So. Something that's always a joy, I think, and when you see people discover sort of new techniques or just new ways of doing things, new tools, perhaps. So tell us a little bit about your creative influences and your ideas. You've both got very distinctive styles and distinctively different from each other, albeit, you're within the world of contemporary silversmithing, but you both have very distinctive styles. Callum, where do you look to? What are your sources of inspiration? What informs your fairly minimal forms at first glance?
Well, I suppose it's imagining something and purely getting down what I see in my head into a real thing, and be it functional, non-functional, or so I think a lot of my process starts with drawing, and really simple drawings, just abstract shapes or kind of ideas of using a technique within a shape or within a material, and kind of pushing it from there, really.
That's your absolute bare bones and a starting point. In a previous conversation, you mentioned the word posture, and you really opened my eyes in thinking about posture so many of not just people but objects. Elaborate, please, because that was fascinating to me.
Well, I suppose with my work, posture is a huge key part of each piece, and I did do a project of where I started looking at kind of life drawings in a very, very kind of simple way, and using the human torso as inspiration for pieces. So I'd start with a very simple kind of silhouette outline of the form, and then that would become the shape of the piece. And then you can change, how any object has a posture, whether it's kind of short and stout and kind of sits on a table very confidently and really like sturdy. It's kind of, its posture is confident, or something that is tall and thin would suggest that perhaps that it's kind of a little bit more poised, maybe slightly snooty, or that you can play with it in quite fun ways. And I think that posture has influence in most pieces that I make.
Absolutely. You made me see your work quite differently after explaining that the first time. And especially because you often put groups of pieces, or there's juxtapositions between different pieces. And I could instantly then see them with personalities because of that.
And that's where I want the pieces to have something humane in them. We're, as humans, we're not perfect. We don't. We're not this beam of perfection. And I really struggle to kind of relate and connect with objects that you can't see the human touch in them, or you can't relate to them in any way, or see where you are meant to be involved with them. Or I think if you've got a piece that has these slight human imperfections, or well, we say them as imperfections, but I think there's something slightly perfect about them.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it has given me a much greater insight into your work and an enjoyment of your work once I see it through those eyes. So thank you. I'm sure everybody else will agree on that. Samuel, very, very different style and clearly different references. What are your sources? What are your resources?
First of all, just I just find that if I could just say that, I find that process so interesting, because it is so very, very different to mine. And it's really, really fascinating to see how someone else goes about it and views something. Gents, my process is definitely very well. I think Callum actually mentioned something which was very similar as well. My inspiration, I think, is sort of ancient art, really, and particularly very simple ancient art, ancient like paintings, ancient metalwork, ancient ceramics, but usually things which and usually the sort of patterns which go with ancient pattern and form. I think combining those two is what really interests me. But Callum, I think Callum mentioned that usually he sort of starts. I'm not sure if I got this right, but Callum said it starts in Callum's head, maybe and you can almost maybe envisage the drawing of that in your mind. And I'm very similar in that way, I think. I think we mentioned it last time, but at the risk of, don't want to sound pretentious, but sometimes it is years between having an idea of making something and then starting the idea. And then within those years, that piece may change. Well, obviously, it will change quite a lot. And that sort of that process, I think, is really, really nice. So I'm. So it's not just nice. Obviously, it's nice, but it's very helpful, because that sort of length of time enables it to. So I'm different to Callum in the way that I don't really draw things. I'm sure it would be extremely helpful if I did, but as Callum was mentioning, if he sort of envisages things in his mind. That's exactly what I do. And also as I'm sure it does with Callum, in my mind, maybe the sort of drawing happens as well, in which it adapts in my mind also. Sorry, just that sort of wandered a bit there, but anything ancient, really, ancient and simple is my inspiration.
Yeah, I think that's quite clear when we look at your pieces. They're very evocative. They do sort of instantly refer you to. I always think they're quite Grecian, but I guess that's just one.
Grecian, did you say?
Yeah.
Well,
but I guess your thoughts are from all sorts of ancient artifacts.
It's really interesting, but there are so many ancient. There's so much ancient art which is so similar. There was this great program I saw about ancient art, and there was a painting of a couple of monkeys on a wall. These beautiful blue monkeys. And there was such a good phrase used by, I think it was Simon Sharma, I'm not sure, it was either Simon Sharma or Jamie Foxx, I think. And he used such a great, he was talking about the tail of these monkeys, which was just one blue line, but it just looked absolutely perfect. It just looked perfect. And he had this great phrase, which always sort of stuck with me because I thought it was so good. He said it's the audacity of simplicity. And I thought that was such a perfect phrase, and that's something, if I was to analyse my work, I would really hope that some part of my work tries to contain that, tries to describe that feeling.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Yeah, it is. So your processes, you have an idea, you may do sketches, you may instantly pick up your hammer, your metal, your saw. What is that process for you, Samuel, to continue with your, say, a vessel, a bowl? What's your first point of making?
Well, I think my first point would probably be, as I say, maybe quite a lot of time imagining that piece first. But then recently I've also been really enjoying making a shape in ceramic first. So I've been going to a really great ceramic studio here, and experimenting with lots of shapes and also glazes, which is quite interesting which is very helpful in terms of decorating that piece. So I'll make a ceramic form, and then if I'm happy with it, I'll then try and go from there in terms of making that into metal. Which is it's really nice to obviously be able to have that 3Dness and to be able to hold it and feel it rather than just as a drawing, which is lovely and very, very helpful.
What about you? Are you straight into the metal? Do you make paper models, for example? I
don't make paper models. No, I think it's like when I've made a ceramic that I like, I have spent a lot of time making ceramic, which I first of all thoroughly enjoy. So, and then when I've got a shape, it's funny, but then I sometimes just sort of feel like I know that that's the shape I'm going to base my next.
And you understand how you will replicate that, as it were, into metal.
Not initially, actually. That's a bit more difficult, actually, because obviously, usually if you say you raise a bowl, which is the standard, most traditional way of raising a bowl, you're beginning with a flat circular disc of metal. But obviously, when you're working with ceramics, your starting point is not a flat disc of clay. It's a big lump of clay, which you can then. It's much easier to create thickness and angles with ceramic than it is with a sheet of metal. But one way I've adapted that. So I had these ceramics which I really loved, and I loved. So if you imagine the exterior and interior of a ceramic bowl, they don't need to follow each other whatsoever, because you can cut in differently to how you can cut in. You can cut inside differently to how you can shape the outside. But obviously, if you're raising with a flat silver disc of metal, which is say 1 millimeter thick, the interior and exterior are always going to mimic each other with a distance of just 1 millimeter roughly. So one way I got around that was by making. I made a couple of. I turned on a lathe a couple of wooden models, which were sort of the starting point. They were usually the base of my piece. They were the base of my ceramic, not the whole thing, but the base, which I would then cast as a huge, heavy lump of silver, and then from there, I would then raise it outwards, which would enable me to. I was able to thin particular parts and leave other parts necessary thickness.
Yeah. So you get close to manipulating the metal in a way that you might with a much more malleable and plastic clay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that.
But utilising quite a lot of different techniques in even your metalwork casting and raising as you know, in combination. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's how I got around that.
That's your first, your building techniques. Callum, how does that compare to your process? The minute you've committed to an idea and want to take up your metal of choice.
It's very different. It's fascinating to hear such a different kind of way of making. But I do suppose our work is very different. I mean, for me, it's because what I'm trying to make often isn't just a singular piece. It'll be, 3 or 4 pieces that make up one piece. So I see each of my pieces as a still life almost. So starting off on a drawing and then moving on to, so you're kind of getting the layout and getting shapes that work well with each other, or a form that works well with the other. And I think that's where torsos kind of came in, and posture, because it's how they sit and how they align and how they kind of communicate. So I often just do a little drawing to get the kind of idea out, and then start working with the material and let that kind of have its say in the process. And because I do use not just precious metals, but steel, stainless steel, brass, gilding metal, nickel.
But they must all behave very differently and take you on different routes sometimes.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's selecting a technique for the metal. So over the years, I've learned that one metal won't do the same, obviously, to the next. So that I think is really interesting, because it always keeps you on your toes and constantly problem solving and learning through, the different metals. So yeah, I guess start off a nice, simple, just pencil drawing, nothing too detailed, because I don't want to try and stay to that drawing, because I know at the end of it it's going to be different, because because the
metal or your hammers or whatever will have an influence on how it evolves.
Yeah.
I guess that's the process. And how long, Callum? How long typically might a piece take, or is that a ridiculous question? And does it help to have a deadline, say for a show or for a client, or do you feel restrained by that? Lots of little questions in there, but it's about the length of time. Typically, I think, is the gist of it.
I think deadlines are always good, and if someone's commissioning something, I think that's a really exciting process, because there's collaboration of ideas and a lot of conversations to be had, and I find that really interesting, exciting, and inspiring. But I suppose it really varies, because I'll have quite a few pieces on the go at once. I suppose maybe it's even a question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know, because there is so many going along each time. It is always, it could be from a couple of weeks to a month, I suppose, depending on the scale. there's new pieces I've been kind of working on slowly, and I think that design process and figuring out actually what the thing will be and how it will be made, I think that takes the longest, and then the making obviously takes as long as it takes, and often quite a while, because you want it to be really nice.
And I guess because the metal, as you both said, is you're not committing yourself to an absolute exacting mathematical design template that you then replicate in metal. You're letting the metal take you on a bit of a journey, and I guess surprise you sometimes.
Yes, I mean it does. Sometimes it's kind of annoying when something happens and it's not going the way you want it to, and it's often that it's a couple of days where you've done something wrong, and you know that it could either be you or just the metal's not on your side that day, and hopefully it's normally the metal that's making the mistake. But I think it's important to make mistakes so you can learn and improve each time.
Yeah. I like to see mistakes as opportunities to either evolve or to learn, whatever your endeavour is. I'm a passionate gardener, and I don't see gardening mistakes and failures as failures. They're just a new opportunity. So I guess same in most creative circumstances. Samuel, you alluded to the fact that from concept to finished object can sometimes take you years. How do you marry that with perhaps a commission for a client?
I don't know really about that. Just I think if I get a commission, then I obviously speed up quite a lot. Because then, in a way, they've obviously sort of done the work for you already in terms of saying what they want, I suppose.
So, no, that's interesting, isn't it? So what you've both talked about, sort of, the enjoying the dialogue and the exchange of ideas with clients. So that would inform a commission piece.
Yeah, exactly as Callum said, I feel exactly the same way in that 90% of the work is done in, first of all, figuring out what you want to make, but then also like it's not the making but how you're going to make it. That takes the longest amount of time. So I'll always make like a sample. So I'm making a bracelet at the moment, which is of 12 individual pieces, but I spent an incredibly long amount of time just making the first sample of those pieces, and that took by far the longest. Well, I'm not quite sure actually, but it took a very disproportionate amount of time to make that one piece in comparison to the 12. But I think in general, really, so jewelry I think takes me less time than my silversmithing, but I'd say probably in general now I think it's sort of come around, so I spend about a month on each piece, a month to 2 months, I think, something like that. Yeah.
And we've got the pleasure. I think one of the big advantages of instigating these films, rather than us talking in person at what would be the Goldsmiths Fair in the very grand halls, we have the added benefit of being able to talk to you within your own workspaces. So that's an insight that people wouldn't normally have, which I think is a real privilege. I'm always fascinated to see what goes on behind the scenes. Callum, explain where you work. Do you share your studio? Is it close to home? Is it in your back garden? Tell us where you actually work.
So I work in a shared space with two other friends. One builds and there's a textiles worker and knitter. And it's in a very old building, but it's very cold in the winter and very warm in the summer. So it's a good space, and it's new to me because I was an artist in residence in London at London Met until just before Christmas. So I've only just really getting used to having my own space and figuring that out as well, which has been good, and getting all the tools together. So yeah, it's
and you have access to it whenever you like. It's you can work at your own pace without having to book time or anything like that. It doesn't interrupt the flow. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that was the intention of moving out of London, is that I could have that bit more freedom, and it's really interesting how that affects your creativity and I suppose motivation as well.
Samuel, talk us around yours a little bit.
So I work in a studio just on my own, but it's in a courtyard with lots of other silversmiths and makers, and we each have our separate studio. And it's in a really nice old building, which is an old cutlery factory in Sheffield. Which is very, very, it's just great working here. And I feel like I've worked as I mentioned before, I worked in a shared workshop in London, but now it's just me in here, but there's a really nice community in the same building, which is just great. With Ryan McLean, who's another Goldsmiths exhibitor and a great silversmith, and an unbelievable silversmith. So it's great to be able to share ideas. We don't really share ideas, but it's just that, again, it's sort of that being in close proximity to people doing similar things that I think if that was taken away, I think I would really, really notice it. So yeah. Just in terms of making, really, because you can, it's just great to be surrounded by other makers, basically.
Other creative people.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that brings me to something that I think you've raised for us, Samuel, previously as a very pertinent point, is being within a community of creative people, whether it's just one or two people in your own workspaces, but also the benefits of coming together as a creative community during Goldsmiths Fair, which for me is a really powerful part of the experience, and every maker speaks so highly of the support that goes on. That's clearly missing for us all this year, which I'm sure has a big impact on you. Has it made you sort of value that sort of almost once a year gathering of creative souls? Tell us a little bit about your feelings about missing out on that this year, quite sadly.
I'm going to miss it hugely, really. It's undescribable how enjoyable, but also how helpful it is to go and meet and communicate, obviously, with everyone else, all the other makers. And it's going to be very, very sad not to be there. It's such a useful time in terms of, I think, obviously because of the people. I've always been amazed at how generous other Goldsmiths exhibitors are with their first of all, with their enthusiasm about your work or your upcoming projects, or about new, or also. Obviously, it's funny because obviously there's a really interesting. I think all the exhibitors managed to balance something so nicely, which is we're obviously we all have our own techniques and our own styles, but what I love is that I think we're very open about talking about our work, and most of the time about how we do that work. But there's no fear that anyone is ever going to start copying your work. It's that sort of like confidence of it's sort of like a confidence and a generosity, because maybe something that person says, obviously maybe you won't, obviously you're not going to take it and then emulate what they've done, but maybe that might help inform you on how to do something else, if you follow me, which is and that sort of sharing of ideas, which is so beneficial to the group, I think, because then everyone sort of I'm obviously just speaking for myself, but I feel like that really has lifted me up a lot, that communication. So yeah, not having that, I'm hopefully I'll be able to go back to other conversations I've had in previous years and use those as inspiration. But I'm definitely going to miss it.
Callum, what are your thoughts on that subject?
I'm very much the same, really. I think it's such an important time of year, not just for kind of communicating with other makers, but also the guys at the Goldsmiths company and also the clients, and talking to people that, want to know about your work. It's such a tricky thing, I think, especially for my work, is that the most enjoyable part of it is talking to people about it and having that ability to then show them how pieces work, show them and other makers as well. And it's a shame not to be able to do that. But being able to, considering the circumstances that we have this amazing opportunity to do it online, there obviously will be things that we'll miss and miss out on. But
the inevitably that real life experience and face-to-face contact is greatly missed from this event and from many other bits of our life through this year. But we've all had to catch up very quickly on presenting ourselves and communicating in using all these different digital methods. But hopefully we gain something positive out of that we take forward and we can combine both. And it's been a steep learning curve for all of us, really. I think I'd like to sort of end it on a little bit of a high, and I know you'll both be sharing new work in a different way and probably not in your preferred way this year at Goldsmiths Fair. But tell us a little bit about any new pieces, one particular favourite new piece that you're presenting this year, just a little bit of detail.
I've been working on two sterling silver serving spoons, which I kind of started over lockdown as a project to kind of, because I've been forging spoons, but I've not really displayed them before at the fair. So this will be a first. But I'm very, very happy and excited to see them. And it was really interesting because I had to find a way of photographing them that you could understand the scale and the form and everything. And so that was quite interesting, learning how to do that as well as making the spoons.
What I've seen, I think you've shared a little bit of that process and the end result on your Instagram account, and certainly you've definitely mastered the photography. There's been some beautiful posts. So thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing them. Obviously online, and looking forward to seeing them in reality at some point in the future.
Yes,
that will happen. How about you, Samuel? What's your showcase piece this time?
So I've been working on a new sort of style, which is it's a sort of cloisonné or inlay of sort of different colours of metal. In a nice sort of simple pattern. But I've been trying to incorporate this style into a box, a bangle and a bracelet so far. I've been really enjoying that. I've done this before, but I've been making different colours of gold and then putting them, I hope, putting them next to each other in a nice contrast of colour. In a sort of repetitive process. I finished the bangle and I have the box and the bracelet still to finish.
Exciting. Well, power to your hammers, guys. Absolutely. It's been a fascinating insight into your work and practices. And thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you too to our audience. for sharing this time with us. And I hope you can stay around a little bit longer after this introductory film and join me, Sam, and Callum for a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Janice, Callum and Samuel. I think that was wonderful, a really nice insight into two very different practices, but it's sort of both coming at silversmithing from sort of similar viewpoints as well, which is quite interesting. I know that they're all going to come in as panelists in a minute, so we'll be able to speak to them themselves. We did have a comment, and it's for Samuel. Samuel, you were talking about the importance of monkeys' tails sort of much earlier on in the programme, and there was a phrase that you find very important around the monkey's tails. Could you repeat that? Can you remember what you were talking about? Because somebody missed it, the sound went out.
Of course, yeah. I'm sorry about that, guys. So it was on a programme about ancient art, and it was looking at these blue monkey tails, and either Simon Sharma or Jamie Foxx, I think, said that they had the audacity of simplicity, and that was the phrase that I really liked, like the sort of I don't know, the sort of bravery to be so simple, I suppose. Maybe that's sort of what I took from it, really. Yeah, and I always liked that.
Thank you very much. And also, your camera's on the side, which is why I keep going like that. I don't know how we fix that one too. I don't know whether we can turn that or whether we have to turn our heads.
That's weird. Sorry about that.
Don't worry. As long as we can hear you. Janice,
I can turn it. I can turn it. Right? I'll try and turn it.
That's great. Thanks, Sam. A question that's popped up and equally intrigues me. I've been giving it more thought, but both of you spoke about your sort of preparation and your design process in our earlier talk. Callum, you talked about drawing a lot, whether it's life drawing or drawing out sketches of the pieces, and Samuel talks about making his models in ceramics. Either of you show these preparation pieces, stages? Do you share them? Do you even sell them? Is the question we've had. Callum, perhaps. Well, Samuel's juggling his camera around.
Yeah, what's that?
Yes,
I have displayed.
Sorry, go ahead, Callum.
Yes, I have displayed some of them. I think there were even, I think, the first Goldsmiths Fair I did, I think they did a slideshow of kind of our processes and drawings and things. And there were some of the drawings from the postures and torsos that I did for that project. I've never really displayed them in the sense of selling, because they're all in my sketchbooks. So it's kind of quite a hard thing to them for me. So.
No. Cool.
But it would be
nice that
something
you share
like
them as part of an exhibition.
Yes, yeah.
We're definitely being plagued by a little bit of the sound gremlins this afternoon. Obviously, a peak Wi-Fi usage somewhere. Samuel, are you back with us?
Yeah.
Do you want to pop your mic back on for us? Technical difficulties, which I think you'll all appreciate. When we're trying these live sessions, they're inevitable to a certain extent. Samuel, we're losing Sam a bit.
Oh, no.
There we are.
Hey,
Hi, Samuel. Thank you. That's great. That's fine. I was asking Callum particularly about his drawings and whether he exhibits and shares them at all. What about your ceramics? I'm interested in these actual design stages, and a question we had was whether you share them, or whether you even sell these parts of the process.
Yeah, I have shown them before at just at a show where the ceramics were particularly close to the silver that I made, but I've never sold them. No, I've given one to a friend, a customer friend. apart from that, I quite like to keep them myself as just to keep them, but also as they're quite nice sort of reference points to go back to sometimes. And they're just nice to. It's nice to it's like a sort of memory of that piece, really, which is quite nice to hold on to.
Of course, and like Callum, they don't stop being useful. Callum said the same about his sketches. They continue to be informative and reference for you and your work.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions, Harriet?
Yeah, sorry, can you see? So we've had one in, and we sort of touched on this at the end of your talk. The fact that we're not at Goldsmiths Fair this year, and we were all working online, and how different that is in terms of selling, communicating, everything. So we do have a question about what are Callum and Sam's view of selling in a virtual environment where the potential buyer cannot handle your pieces, and then it continues on. But if we want to start with that bit, how do you feel about the virtual fair this year and not being able to not having pieces there in front of you to be handled?
It's been quite interesting, and my work relies a lot on people's interaction with it. All of it's always quite interactive work, either be it that you can kind of use it and take it apart and fit it together. So that has been my challenge predominantly this year, is to try and photograph it, video it in a way that kind of conveys that in a digital platform. But really, I would much prefer the person to be able to look at it face to face and take it apart and kind of get that experience themselves. So it has been challenging, but educational. Learned a lot about my work, as well as the digital world that we seem to be kind of living in at the moment.
Inhabiting, yes. And Samuel, do you feel the same? How's it been for you?
I think it's definitely been much more challenging, really, and it's not. I think obviously it's always going to be the best way to be able to hold something and feel it and see it up close with your own eyes. But then at the same time, I really do think that the digital, it's like the best. There are so many things which are good, which have been done here, like these videos and interviews, and open studios, which have made it as interactive as possible, which I think is really, really good. I think it's really, really good, but really, unfortunately, I don't think anything. I think we all know nothing's going to beat being able to hold something yourself. So it has been a challenge, but I think definitely making the most of the alternative. I think that's just what I'd say.
Do you think there's anything? I think particularly for silversmiths, do you think there's anything more that we could have done to help make it more accessible? No,
I don't think in these extreme kind of circumstances. I think you've done what is possible. Really, I think if there was, then you would probably have done it. I think that we need to be sensible. We need to be kind of safe about these things, and if it means that you're giving us a platform. So I think anything else beyond that platform is kind of up to us and the client, whether they feel sensible or want to come and see the piece. And then maybe it's even more exciting because they get to come see the workshop, they get to come see where it's made, or
I think that's we've also had a question specifically for Callum, but I think we can also go over to Samuel. But can we see the spoons? Has come in from somebody. Do you both have pieces?
Things that we can do.
Do you have pieces that you could show us on camera right now? Because I think that really brings pieces to life as well. If you've got anything to hand.
Callum, would you like to go first?
These spoons.
With Callum's internet is not.
These are the spoons that I have.
Okay, Samuel, why don't you go ahead while we get Callum's
Of course. Well,
I've disappeared.
There you are, Samuel.
sorry, Harry.
You're there, so if you want to show
Cool.
what you've got.
Well, I don't. I do have one spoon, which, but I'll show you just this bangle first. This is a piece that I finished a couple of months ago. I'm not sure if that's in focus at all, but that's the bangle that I mentioned in the pre-recorded interview, which has got these sort of different colours of like a very simple pattern with different colours of gold around it. Which I was happy with, and that's also the sort of inlay style that I've been working on. That's also gone into this box and bracelet that I've been working on.
Yeah, we have a picture of it. Fantastic.
Ah, cool. But I do have a spoon. Just as someone was mentioning spoons, this is a spoon that I've shown. I showed it last year, but I was really happy with it. That's another spoon, which I made a set of. But at the moment, what I'm currently working on is this is the bracelet that I'm currently working on, which is made of all these individual tiles. Sorry guys, I know it's very small. I'm not sure how well it's going to come into focus. But yeah, so that's what I've been working on recently. Yeah.
Very nice. Let's see. Is Callum back?
Am I back? What? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
There's some of the spoons. One serving spoon, which are forged from a billet of silver, a large billet, which I managed to get 2 out of in the end. And that is the pair.
Oh, they're stunning, Callum. Really stunning.
They're a really good size, aren't they? It's sort of extraordinary.
Yeah,
and just forged out of one piece.
Yes, right? they start off as a block that's kind of that long, and then maybe a few centimeters big, that thick, and then lots of hammering and cleaning and stoning to get nice and smooth.
I think we might get a picture. There we go. We have a picture, which is really nice. I mean, both Samuel's bangle and Callum's spoon, really beautiful. It's extraordinary how soft you make the metal look. I think it's wonderful, that hand finishing. And I've just got a quick question. For Callum, do you prefer working with silver or non-precious metals?
I think they each serve a purpose. I think I love silver and I love precious metals because of, they are just beautiful. But I think non-ferrous metals and kind of the non-precious metals have their place in the kind of silversmithing world, because, I think for me it started off as this kind of way of being able to create scale without having to have this vast amount of money that you would need to start with to actually create this design, or a larger design. And then I think it also makes the precious metals more precious because they're either being held by something else, and it's almost with the candlesticks, there's kind of the component inside is the precious metal part, and that's kind of hit, cozy in the non. That's really interesting because you get different colours and conversations going on.
I've just got another question that's come in. What about the differences between working in silver versus gold, especially particularly for Samuel?
Not sure really. I really love working in both, to be honest. I absolutely love working in fine silver when making silverware, because it's just so beautifully clean. You can just heat it up until it's very, very pink, and let it cool, and it just stays such a beautiful white color. which I just love. And as opposed to if you work with metal, silver, which has some copper content in it. And yeah, I love how soft and malleable it is. When you're raising, you can sort of, if you add, particularly with fine silver, you can. Just for me, I can sort of, you can sort of feel it compressing because you can almost just push it in. You can just push that circumference of a disc of metal in, which I just really love. But I do absolutely love working with gold as well. And one thing I particularly enjoy is making different colours of gold, which I find really enjoyable. And then it's just lovely watching that sort of the spectrum of colour, and how I really like it how the spectrum moves from white gold into sort of a green gold. That's my favourite area, and then into a yellow, and then into a pure gold. I think that's I love that sort of transformation really. And I've just I've made like I've got a sort of a catalogue of all these colours with very slight differences of composition of the elements, and it's quite nice to just sort of refer back to that just to put colours together. But it's funny, you sort of need to, well, personally I've felt that you need to usually put two colours, you can't put two colours which are too close together in the spectrum together, otherwise you can't notice their differences. But if you move from either end of the spectrum, you can then, they sort of bring out the whites or the greens or the yellows or the pure golds of each other basically. So I love, they've both got their properties, and they're really enjoyable to watch and use.
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it, that the two of you, although you're working just in metals and you're not using stones and things like that, that actually, when you look at either of your works in very different ways, they're quite colourful. You know, Callum with your non-precious metals and, you know, mixed with that silver that really does highlight that silver. And I love the way you've hidden it in those, it's just sort of tucked away in those candlesticks. And then Samuel with that array of golds, which they're just sort of mesmerising when you look at those sort of sun bowls and things like that. I mean, they're wonderful. But I think I sort of hadn't thought about that, but actually you're incredibly both very colourful with very limited palettes in a strange way, which I think is very interesting. Janice, do you have any further questions?
No, I think it's just picking up on that point, particularly how Callum articulated the non-precious or so-called non-precious metal, the way it's actually cloaking and protecting the softer silver inside is again imbuing a piece with real personality, which I think is one of your real trademark voices, Callum, for me is very strong.
Thank you.
Really nice. Well, thank you, everybody. Really, really lovely. It's lovely to get into your sort of studios, into your heads a little bit. And I think going back to the fact we're not at the fair, and being able to put these out, on Zoom, these conversations is really wonderful, and we're getting a lot of appreciation to be able to sort of speak to you in this sort of strange way. So thank you for taking the time, all of you, and Janice, thanks so much for talking to them. And please do contact Samuel and Callum through the website. They're really happy to talk to you about their pieces, and happy purchasing as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Harriet. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Harriet.